I'm going to start the meeting. I just want everybody to remember that this meeting is being audio and video recorded. We'll start with introductions. My name is Linda Lukowski, and I'm school committee.
I'm Erin Berger, and I'm school committee.
Paul Goldner, school.
And Hunter, school committee.
Ronnie Ray Parrott, Select Board, Salisbury.
Richard Key is Finance Committee from Newbury.
Narissa Wallen, school committee.
Mike Colburn, Salisbury Selectman.
Jerry David, Raleigh Board of Selectmen.
Kelly Smullen, School Committee.
Brian Perry, Triton Regional School District, Director of Finance and Operations.
Brian Forget, Superintendent, Triton Regional.
I want to thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. Can we rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? We have the notes from the January 23rd and the February 6th meetings. No formal vote is needed. These are notes and not official minutes. Does anybody have any comments or clarifications they would like to make? Hearing none. Upcoming DCC meetings, I apologize for this, but when the DCC calendar was put together last fall, the April meeting was the Thursday of school vacation, and I know some people may be going away. We would like to move that one in the month to April 10th, and since that moves it quite closer to the current March date, I would also propose moving that one earlier to March 20th. So the two dates would be April 10th and March 20th. Is that okay with everybody?
So Raleigh would host?
We would leave them where whoever was supposed to host them. And the next item is the FY26 budget development. Brian is going to give an update on the work the district's been doing, and then we would look forward to an update from the towns. Brian?
Oh. So we good with dates? Okay. So I'm trying to remember how long we had so many discussions about the budget. When was the last time we had a conversation with our towns? Was it in Raleigh?
We resume on February 6th.
That's right. Okay. So I think since we've met, you have all received copies of our tentative budget that the school committee approved on February 12th. I won't go through that. I think there's been lots of discussion around that budget. The document that was in front of you tonight is an updated version of pages 1 and 2 from the budget. So in the full tentative budget, pages 1 and 2 outlined every change from the existing fiscal 25, the current year. Since that was finalized, we've continued to tweak. We know there are reductions that are needed to continue to prioritize, having lots of conversations internally about where those reductions can come from. And so last night, the document that you have on the table tonight was discussed with the committee. Anything that is bold with the yellow coloring on the left label is different than the tentative budget. The key there down the bottom is 3 new reductions. So there's down the bottom of the budget where it says savings. Those are the reductions off of the budget requests that we looked at. We'll call them level services. There were certainly a few things that were kind of must-dos for cost avoidance, like adding some speech and language services, for example, through special education. So those reductions there, reducing or cutting the wellness coordinator, there's a 1.0, and again, an FTE is a full-time equivalency. So at the high school, that's 5 sections, course sections. Those are this cut here are sections that don't currently, they're not currently filled. It was a teacher that we didn't replace moving into this year. Looking at efficiency, could we make the department work? It worked. Definitely we lose flexibility in being able to provide some course offerings, but that reduction there is 1 full person, but it's actually 5 sections, and there's no body that was cut. There's no individual because that wasn't filled. The out-of-district savings was a change with a student placement. Negotiations, the PEC, I know Christina's our rep, from the towns, the Public Employee Committee, which includes Christine and our members of the Personnel Negotiation Subcommittee, has been meeting with the PEC that negotiates healthcare for all employees of the district. Collectively, we don't bargain those in individual contracts. There's a target there of $300,000 in savings. I don't believe we had our renewal rates last time we sat around a screen together. I think your towns are dealing with the same wild numbers. We got a 16.12% on our medical plans, our HMOs and PPOs, and a 10.2 something, 10.23% increase on dental. Obviously, much smaller number to start, so that's much less of an impact than the health insurance. So I imagine 2 of our 3 towns are Maya reps or Maya members as well. So I know. You had Larry? We have Larry. Yeah, we have Larry too. We'll continue here on camera. Thought bubble, put it away. I appreciate that. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm guessing you guys are dealing with the same thing, right? I think. So the range for Maya was 10 to 20%, roughly, which is the highest I've ever seen the range in my 20 years of doing this. 12 point something. I talked to districts that are seeing a 27, a 25, 19s. I know Newbury has been dealing with that. I think you guys were in the upper teens to 20. So we've been told by Larry, our rep, to expect double-digit increases for this year and 2 more years. So it is this correction. There's lots of reasons for it. Some hyperbole and some, I think, fact. But just the industry is reeling right now, and so that is certainly a driver. Included in this budget is $1 million increased healthcare. So when we look at a bottom line of 2.625 increase, $1 million of that. Without healthcare increases, we'd be at a $1.6 million increase and having a very, very different discussion with all of you as far as how that impacts assessments. So that is the target to reduce $300,000 through that's through plan design change, cost share, and what have you. Circuit breaker, there's new revenues coming in. That is the special education component of circuit breaker that was added with the Student Opportunity Act. It was never really funded. Legislators understood that it was, and so the first year it was funded at 57 rather than 75%. This year it's at 44% rather than 75. And so we finally got our legislators to understand that there are people saying it's fully funded at 75%, and it is on the academic side of the house, but not on the transportation. So there is definitely momentum that now that everyone understands that we'll get that money. There's a chance we could get some of that this year with the final correction in any supplemental budget, but certainly for next year, that's a welcome addition that I think will stick. And then the 3 down the bottom are the ones that will continue to we'll say will stay in flux over the coming weeks and probably beyond that as we move towards 2 of our 3 towns having already said they need to have an override. So one is up above, there was a multilingual instructional assistant at Salisbury, as well as a special educator that were funded currently by a grant. Both of those rolled into the general fund, not a new position, same people, same services. We just have to carry that in the general fund because the grant's going away. So that amount for the special educator remains. For the IA, we actually are able to, we've seen a huge shift in the population for our ELs. Almost about 45% of them are actually at Salisbury Elementary right now. So we'll actually be able next year, or I will be next year when we make that shift, be able to move EL teachers, not just an instructional assistant, but an actual licensed EL teacher over to Salisbury to provide the additional services needed. So we know of retirements or resignations with IA, so that IA will be able to stay. It would just be in a different role. So that shows up as a savings because it showed up as an increase up above. And then the big one here is combining middle school TLC is our autism spectrum disorder program and the essentials program. Those two programs, so there is an allowable age span where students can be together. It's your old world, Chris, right? There's a maximum age span. For next year, we can combine those programs for the middle school and the high school, and there are 2 retiring teachers who we don't replace. We will have an aligned schedule with the middle school and high school for next year so that resources can be shared more readily across this entire campus, staffing resources. And so in doing that, it achieves obviously significant savings, close to $200,000. That age span could very well go in the other direction in fiscal '27, and we might have to add back 1 or both of those teachers. So it wouldn't be more than 2 because that's the staffing for 2 independent programs, 1 at each of those for TLC, both at and Essentials, both middle school and high school. But for next year, at least, we can combine them. I know there were questions last night from the school committee with Shannon Nolan about caseloads, and is that making, a normally large caseloads, and it's not. Again, it's just, at this point, this is a numbers game, right? And it works for a year. We know there's a significant number of students in 5th grade that will transition up from Newbury Elementary in the TLC program in the following school year. And in all likelihood, this would be a 1-year savings that we have to put back the following year. And then it leaves to be determined cuts of $257,000. So that was where we started the evening last night. I had some conversations with Neil Harrington about where Salisbury's at and where Salisbury has clearly indicated, and again, I spoke with Neil again today, has confirmed there's no appetite or intent to move toward an override in Salisbury. And so he confirmed in my conversations yesterday, he had confirmed, and I reconfirmed today to make sure I wasn't misrepresenting him last night. He reconfirmed that the number that Salisbury can support within the budget is a approximately $650,000 increase. So the budget, as you saw with the tentative, put Salisbury at 717. So backing into that number, right? It's a further reduction of about 175,000. So that's the number that, as of last night when the committee left the table, that's the target, right? So that's the place that we believe we need to go to get to that number that Rowley be able to support. So from the... Yes, I mean Salisbury. Right. With that, and again, we haven't produced new assessments or any of that, but the difference is Newbury's assessment goes from 587 down to 533. Rowley's goes from, I think you were a touch over $1 million to 949, and Salisbury goes from 717 down to 651. So that's an increase in the operating expenditures of $2.45 million. That yields that roughly 4% increase to the Salisbury budget. So that number, that 257, is actually about 432,000 as far as a deficit that we need to close. The discussion we had around the table last night and trying to draft communication, because we have a public hearing tomorrow. I'm sorry, we're going to get a message out tomorrow because we have a public hearing next week. Normally, we have a very clear path, right? The tentative budget, it's the high water mark, that's what we're having a public hearing on. It's very nuanced this year, right, as it's kind of ebbed and flowed. And so we're in a situation where we may land with to-be-determined cuts to get to a final budget, which isn't something we've historically done. However, you're all watching the political landscape. There's potential for loss of federal funds. There's the potential for gaining of local state funds. There's an impetus, there's definitely momentum with the need for Chapter 70 reform, with now the 211 plus 21, right? So it's 232 of the communities in the Commonwealth, which has got to be, right, 75%, 70% of the communities are in hold harmless like Triton. So we're only going to get that minimum per pupil aid. And so, so there is momentum, certainly not going to rewrite the formula in the next 3 months before the budget's closed, but there seems to be momentum about increasing minimum aid to offset some of that, increasing, there's Project 211 plus 21, which are the new towns that fill into hold harmless this year, is putting forward, there's a meeting tomorrow night, and they're putting forward a proposal that's got the backing of MASBO and MASS, so superintendents and business officials in Mars and all the various groups, MTA, AFT, for different ways to kind of stop the bleeding while a real solution is found. So, there could be, we're not going to get millions, but could we get 200,000, 150,000, 250,000, right? When you're talking about a gap of 432, that could make some headway. So we talked through last night, I think where, and I want to speak on behalf of the committee, but I think toward the end of the meeting, we were talking about a very atypical final budget where we would have the list of confirmed cuts and then some to be determined savings, because some of it could be cut, some of it could be new revenues. The cuts we talked about publicly last night, the only ones we specifically put on paper are those that you have in front of you. Depending on what that number is, we talked about the fact that there really isn't, outside of, at the educator level, we talked about instructional assistants, and there may be some where we could trim, but not where we can trim and not have an impact. Special educators, caseloads have been trimmed up. We cut 3 last year. So we're really down. We've talked about math and reading interventionists and specialists. Those are at the elementary and middle and in middle school. Need to protect those, the work they're doing both for interventions as well as supporting teachers and current practice. So that leaves class sizes, or classroom teachers, I should say. So at the elementary, there are some sections. There are some grade levels that have 4 sections. And so those class sizes are in the teens, upper teens. You could reduce those to 3 sections and have class sizes in the lower 20s. So looking at everything, but absolutely the priority would be upper elementary before lower elementary. This budget here moves a teacher completely through attrition. Salisbury will be the smallest. If you look at the projected numbers, Newbury and Rowley, Pine Grove and Newbury are projected to be around 440, 445. Salisbury Elementary around 375. So, right, a significant shift in that population. So just through natural attrition, there was an extra teacher because of class cohorts leaving in next year's, current year 6th grade. So we moved a position over to Newbury because Newbury's had a larger influx of students. They've got 65 students in their kindergarten currently in 3 sections, 21, 22 in kindergarten. And it's, right, hugely impactful. So that makes 4 sections over there. They're smaller, but so those are the areas that we've tried to protect, the kind of pre-K through 2. So again, we've had principals have spent a lot of time talking through where those would be, but certainly would want to prioritize the upper elementary. At the middle school, we've still maintained teams, and in that teaming structure, you need 2 teachers per content area. Course load wise, we could remove 1 per content, but you would have the inability to then team because you need 2 at 7 and 2 at 8. So it would function very much like a high school. So it'd be a math department and a science department. And there wouldn't be the ability to have that team structure. At the high school level, it really comes down to larger core classes and kind of, I will say, breadth of programming. So where we're able to add electives that are very popular and certainly important, whether they're in STEM or English or history, we'd be able to offer less electives and larger core classes would be the result. So we didn't say if the number is this, we're going to take this and this, because we're not alone, right? You're reading the paper. Amesbury is talking about it. Millions of dollars in cuts. Georgetown going for a $6 million override. So it's nothing new. As far as, I shouldn't say it's nothing unique that we're struggling with, but at the same time, we want to do the best we can to make sure that our teachers and students are isolated from this so they can keep doing the work and the job that they need to do. So rather than I don't want to put positions on the table that identify people and call them out until we absolutely have to. So the other thing I should say I missed, we talked about at the elementary level, art, PE, and library, we could trim those positions back from full-time, taking some FTEs away, and then they end up sharing across schools. You remember that, Chris, when we had, yeah. Yep, it was done in the past, and it's the impact wouldn't be on the delivery of art, PE, and library. The delivery would be on a lot of our specialists they came out of the classroom, and so when they have free periods from their art, library, and PE, they're actually in classrooms providing direct interventions because they're licensed to do that, or providing coverage when someone doesn't show up or something like that. So that would be more chaotic on the kind of administrative and staff side, and students would miss out on interventions where we wouldn't have those people to fill in. So again, there isn't a plan where we said, here's the number to get to the cuts to get to 432, because that number will continue to ebb and flow over the coming weeks. So the kind of next step in this process, obviously the public hearing is next week. We do have Senator Tarr and then Reps Shand and Kastner coming. At least they confirmed previously that they are coming. And so certainly have our public hearing, have a conversation with them. The committee will give us final guidance on the development of that final budget. And then a final budget will be approved on March 12th. The reality is then, we've had it confirmed from Rowley, and I know that votes haven't been taken, I don't believe, but the intention is that Newbury and Rowley are both going for an override. If one or both, if both fail that override, we would know on May 13th, right? That's the date of the election. If both of those fail, we would know on May 13th. If one passes and one fails, we would wait to Salisbury town meeting to find out if they're not going to be contingent on an override, whether it passes at town meeting. And then by the 19th, I believe, is your town meeting. If we don't have a budget, we then have to come back to the table, change the budget. The assumption is reduce the budget. And the committee needs to determine that amount and then resubmit the budget to the towns. The towns have 45 days to hold another town meeting. If you don't hold a town meeting, it's an automatic yes. So I think that's going to be normally where we would say we have a tentative budget on the 12th of